here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put you to sleep. And that's how you're going to de-stress this afternoon. Hey, no, I'm glad you're here. Let's pray. Lord, we pray, Jesus, that the power of your Holy Spirit will enable me to communicate clearly from what I've learned and what I continue to attempt to practice in my own ministry life. Ministry is stressful. So show us the pathway through your word and show us the pathway through research that's been done in the lives of ministers as they have had to navigate the normal and also the extraordinary stresses of life. So bless these men and women today, I pray in your name. Amen. Well, my name is Doug Graham, and I am privileged to be here. I serve as the interim president at North Central University. 10 years ago, I had my last service preaching in this very auditorium before it was a kids' auditorium, and have a beautiful picture. Someone was up here in the baptistry, took a picture of our staff and the whole congregation, and I hold that dearly. And so 10 years of being at North Central, and now every year being able to come back here to Network Council and give the reports and such. So really good to see many familiar faces, and some of you I'm maybe meeting for the very first time. But I want to tell you just a little bit of the backstory that leads to the material that I want to unpack with you. You all have a handout sheet and some fill in the blanks. I attended North Central University. Vicki and I were married, and in 1986 I graduated from North Central and came here to Bismarck, and I was the youth pastor for 4 years. And that was the time where we were at 16th and Divide, and then halfway through those 4 years we built this building. Pastor Ted Heaston was the lead pastor. And so we migrated everybody over here, and it was just a fantastic experience. Served a couple more years with him, and then he relocated to a church in Wisconsin and asked me and Vicki to stay with him on his staff, and so we moved to Wisconsin with them, and then transitioned to a small church in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and pastored that church for 12 years. And then in 2005, the Evangel Temple, that became eventually Evangel Assembly, called us and asked us if we'd consider candidating, interviewing for being their new lead pastor. And one thing led to another, and we came back in 2005, and we stayed 9 more years, and fabulous things took place, and church grew, and it was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. But something happened in my life in 2002, and I was pastoring in Wisconsin. I had multiple stressors hit my life, kind of like the perfect hurricane, the perfect storm. My wife's father passed away, and I didn't realize how significant that loss in my life was, not only for my wife, but in helping her through it. I didn't realize I had my own loss in that. And I'm Scottish Norwegian, and so we just don't show a lot of emotion, and we're tough people. And so I bottled that grief inside of me. And then the very same year, actually when Vicki and I and all of our kids went out to Montana for the funeral, my dad told me that he and my mother were not doing very well in the marriage. And I didn't even think too much about that. I knew they didn't have a perfect marriage, but it was, whatever. Okay, hope you'll work it out. And assuming they'd work it all out, well, they didn't work it all out. They got divorced after 42 years of marriage. And, they say that, it's good to keep the marriage together until the kids leave the home. I'm telling you what, whenever you get divorced, it kills the kids, whether they're 5-year-olds or 14-year-olds or 39-year-olds. And I learned some things that I had not been aware of, and I got really angry. And, but I'm a pastor, so I can't be angry. So, be angry and sin not. How do you do that? Well, I didn't do it very well because I just stuffed that anger. So I stuffed the grief, I stuffed the anger, and then I had some betrayal issues in ministry, which you all know what that's all about. You try to please everybody, and you end up not pleasing, everybody, and it hurts you when they leave, and they stab you in the back as they walk out the door, and we all try to rise above it and make believe that we're so spiritual that we just walk on water over all those things, and yet it kills us. So I had those 3 things taking place in my life, and I was becoming very anxious and I began to spin into just I don't know how to deal with this. And so just plugging it all in. I came home from work one day a little bit early. Vicki was, I don't know where she was that afternoon, but I came home, she wasn't there. I sat down in the living room, looked out the picture window of our living room, and I just started to cry. I was starting to release the emotion. And she came home and she found me there in a puddle of my own tears, and she said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "I don't know." And as soon as I said those words, "I don't know," I got really scared. Like, am I losing my mind? Am I losing it? You know, the twin companion of anxiety and depression is really a bad mixture. So, but what is beautiful about the whole thing is God knows where we're at. He always knows where we're at. And she made a phone call to her sister, who is a pastor's wife. And we were in Wisconsin. Her sister and my brother-in-law, actually Trent Redmond, who grew up in this church here, were pastoring a church in Minneapolis. And Vicki called Melinda and just conversing about stuff and sharing some things about what I'm going through. And Melinda said, "I know exactly who he needs to see. I know exactly who he needs to see." They had just come out of one of their Ministers Institute enrichment sessions where Dr. Tim Rudin was the speaker. And I don't know, that name maybe doesn't mean anything to you, but Dr. Tim Rudin is an ordained Assemblies of God minister who is also a certified clinical psychologist, and transitioned basically full-time out of ministry to just take care of pastors through burnout situations and other kinds of things. And he did a seminar on stress in the ministry and all of that. And she said, that's who he needs to see. So, boom, I had a counselor to see. Vicki went to talk to the board of our church and said, he's going through something, he needs some time off, and here's the stuff that's kind of going through. And I had a great board who said, yeah, we'll do whatever he needs. Let's give him a sabbatical right now. We'll take care of the counseling and just let's get him healthy. So I started seeing the counselor, but I also went to my medical doctor to get, I heard that maybe some medication might be able to take the edge off this anxiety and depression and all that kind of. Well, the medical doctor diagnosed, yes, you are clinically depressed, and I can give you medication, but I'm only going to give you medication if you get counseling, because the medication will be like Novocaine. It'll dull the pain, but your pain has come about because of some emotional stuff that you have not successfully dealt with, and so the medication will just mask it. And if you don't fix what is going on inside of you, you're going to be strapped to this medication for the rest of your life, and we don't want you to be. So I had everything lined up. I got my counselor. We drove to Minneapolis and started counseling, and that was like a year-and-a-half journey of going every week to see him, once a month to see him, then once every other month, and then just kind of weaning off the counseling, and eventually being able to wean off the medications as well. But I know what it is to be depressed. I know what it is to have high anxiety. I know what it is to ask yourself, can I even move forward in this role, in this call of ministry, when inwardly I'm so empty and I'm so anxious and I'm so just, I'm just a skeleton of my old self for whatever reason, and I needed to get the help that was available. And so that backstory, is the backstory of this talk I give today. But I came back to the church. I went through the sabbatical. I'm still on medication, and I say to myself, I'm going to go back in 3 months, and I'm going to preach to my congregation. I'm going to let them know what had been going on in my life. Now, my board protected me real well, just basically said he's been working hard, and we need to give him a sabbatical. But I came back, I wanted to be able to just tell our congregation, not the nitty-gritty stuff of like my folks' divorce and what happened and all that, but to just simply say I had several things spin out in my life. The stress of it all put me on my back. I needed medication, and I'm not ashamed to tell you I'm on medication. And some of you should be on medication. And they laughed just like you're laughing. And I said, I'm going to counseling. I have a counselor I see. And some of you, could use a counselor. And I've learned to give myself permission to not be perfect. Well, I go through that kind of self-confession, and I have all of my church people, my board afterwards, pat me on the back, and we're with you, and you never need to be perfect. And what I find is that the expectations that I think people are putting on me as a pastor are really not true. I think they're putting that expectation on me, but really I'm putting the expectation on myself. Now, there are going to be people in their congregations who are going to place unrealistic expectations. We all have those extra grace required people who expect you to be Superman or Wonder Woman in every situation. But for the most part, when we begin to think in a catastrophizing measure, like everybody's against me and everybody hates me and everybody wants me to be perfect, that generally is not true. You're believing a lie because your gas tank is empty and you're vulnerable to the lies that the enemy is planting in your head, like nobody loves you, everybody's against you, they're going to vote you out at your next annual meeting, and all those kinds of things. In most cases, when you do good pastoral work and you're faithful, your people are going to love you. Sometimes we want to live out a persona in ministry that is the Superman or the Superwoman, and we define success in some very unhealthy ways. One of my first sessions with my counselor was, because I didn't even know early on in my counseling if I would ever be healthy enough to go back into the ministry. I might just have to resign because I'm broken and I'm empty and I'm done. But I got this thing in my head, Dr. Rudin, that I want, when I announce to the people that I'm done and I'm leaving, I want them all to break out and cry. Like, no, you're our best pastor. We never had anybody like you. And Rudin looked at me and he said, Doug, that's sick. That definition of success is not healthy. So, I got through the sabbatical, I got back in the pulpit, got my feet under me, and learned how to redefine success in the ministry. I grew up very competitive as an athlete. I wanted to be the best pastor, the biggest church, all those kinds of things. And I had to say to myself, that's an idol. That is not what I'm supposed to chase. I'm supposed to chase after the fulfillment of my fullest potential within my gifts and then call it a day. And do my very best. Well, I didn't want to just do my best. I wanted to be the best. And I had to have that, I had to unlearn that. And so having gone through that counseling, helping me, I got back in the pulpit and pastored real well at that church in Wisconsin. And then I get the call to come to Bismarck and lead this great church. When I came here to Bismarck, I started a doctoral program and always loved education, always just we push these master's degrees, Trinity and North Central, we push them because they provide a structure for organized, systematic learning. Now, some of you might be self-taught and you know exactly the books you need to read and the conferences you need to go to, but I needed the program to put me through those paces, and so that's why I worked through a couple of master's degrees and then worked on my doctorate, because I love the pace, I love the directed learning. And so when it came to writing my dissertation for a doctor of ministry, they were always saying from the very beginning of the program is you need to think about what your story is. Like, what do you want to write on? A doctor of ministry is not a PhD. A PhD is a lot of research, a lot of theory, a lot of philosophy. A doctor of ministry is practical. Like, we're going to write a dissertation level on some practical thing, like a curriculum or a program for reaching the lost. And I began to kind of process in my head, what's my story? What have I gone through? What is it that I could do some additional research on that might be beneficial to the body of Christ? And I began to think about this story that I'd gone through in 2002, 2003, the mismanagement of stress. The mismanagement of stress, the mismanagement of my emotions. And then I go to the counselor, and the counselor begins to unpack some things from my past. It's called psychotherapy. Psychotherapy is all about psychologically going through your upbringing, how you were raised. Now, I was raised in a good home. I was raised in a good, wonderful home. My dad was the most supportive dad, was at every athletic event, every band concert. He would travel from from Kalispell, where I grew up, to Great Falls, Montana, which is about 300 miles, to watch me perform in an event where I only performed for 30 seconds, and I was done. My routine was done, and he would have been there. My dad would go to the ends of the earth for us as kids. He was a fantastic dad. He wasn't that fantastic as a husband. And I didn't know that until this whole thing falls apart. And so the counselor helped me to go through my childhood and helped me to piece together the dots that the way in which you've mishandled stress is connected to how you grew up for 18 years. Now, he was not blaming my parents for anything, but he was pointing out that in this Norwegian upbringing, I grew up in a non-emotional family where I love yous were never heard. Now, we felt love because we were provided for. Dad was always there. Mom was always there, but rarely saw mom and dad hug, kiss. I love yous. Never, just the emotional connection in my family of origin just wasn't there. And that translated into how I was now raising my family, and it translated in how I was like pastoring or parenting a congregation. Loving them, being there for them, but struggling to handle the emotion of conflict or the emotion of pushback. I struggled with that, and that created this tension and this stress that came out in sideways ways. So anyway, I wrote a dissertation on management of stress in the ministry and how we handle stress in the ministry as it relates to how we were raised. See, there's a lot of research done on leadership. It's stressful. There's a lot of literature on stress in the ministry. There's a lot of literature on family of origin. Like we are who we are based on family we grew up in. And I wanted to marry those two concepts, like how we handle stress in the ministry, how that relates to how we were raised in our family. To this day, I look at people in the ministry who handle the conflict of typical church stuff, and I say to myself, I bet that pastor right there grew up in a family where healthy conflict was handled in a healthy way. Stress was managed in a healthy way, and vice versa, where there are those who don't handle stress very well, don't handle conflict very well, and it causes me, not to judge them, but to make an educated guess that some of that probably comes out of a family of origin issue. And so my point of my dissertation was not to solve the problem, but was to write a dissertation to show that there is a relationship connection to how you handle your stress in life, in ministry, as it relates to how you were taught how to manage life in your childhood. Now, if you had a dysfunctional upbringing, it doesn't mean that you're going to have a dysfunctional life, as long as you're aware of it. See, when we're aware of the handicaps we bring into our present situation, then we learn how to deal with those handicaps. We mitigate those things. We work on it. We read about it. We go to conferences about it. But the problem is when we don't have the emotional intelligence in this area to where I am super stressed and I'm not even aware that it comes partly how I'm handling it, partly comes from how I was raised. And because I'm not even aware of it, then I just perpetuate this mismanagement of the stress that I've got. So anyway, so what I want to do in this little seminar is I want to walk through my dissertation with you, and there's lots of fill in the blanks, and I'll go through it kind of in bullet form or machine gun form. But before we do that, let's look at a scripture. Matthew 11:28, the familiar passage. Jesus said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Take my yoke, for my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." Jesus didn't say that he would take the burden away. He's going to give us a burden. But it's a burden, when we handle it correctly, it's a burden that we're able to handle, as long as we stay equally yoked with him. And so how do we do that? I'm not really answering that too much, maybe a little bit of practical stuff at the very end, but I want to just give you a little bit of insight to the research that I did. And before I do that, I want to do a little stress test. I want to know how stressed. I want you to become self-aware on how much stress you're currently in. So we're going to do this stress test. Now don't show the picture of the slide until I say show it, okay? So, because it's important that I set this up in your thinking. What happened? Did you show it? Okay, so pretend you didn't see it. Okay. So Stanford has done this very intricate stress test. Okay? Very intricate. And I'm going to show you a picture of two identical dolphins. And the stress in your life, if you have a lot of stress, they're not going to be quite identical. And the difference that the bigger the range of the difference of the two dolphins is going to indicate how much stress you have, okay? So if they're identical, you are living easy, but if they're completely different, it means you have high stress. 1, 2, 3, show the picture. All right. So we got to the punchline too quickly, but anyway. I'm the interim president of North Central University, and I don't see identical dolphins because I'm under tremendous stress, like all of you are as well. Now, here's how I did my research that you'll find very interesting. My research was qualitative in that it was not so data-driven, but it was qualitative, meaning I did a lot of surveys and I did a lot of interviews to hear the stories of people about their opinion about leadership stress, ministry stress, and do you feel like the way you were raised shaped and formed your ability to handle and manage your stress? That was like the big 3 questions I asked. And so I did a huge survey at General Council that particular summer and got hundreds of ministers to do this survey online. But the piece that was really kind of more interesting to me was I found about a dozen Assemblies of God leaders, national General Council leaders, regional leaders, missionaries, pastors, AG college leaders, and I tried to just create as good of a sample size as I possibly could. Now this was 12 years ago, and my research is flawed to date because I didn't interview any women in ministry. So I have to say that now because my sample is skewed, and that if I could do it all over again, and if I was to do this again, I would now obviously want to make sure that we get some women ministers plugged into that. But nonetheless, so you know where I'm coming from. And so they answered these questions, and out of these questions came this little outline that I'm going to give to you. Stress in the ministry is obviously something that we all deal with, and when I unpacked all of the interview material and did grounded research to find the threads and find the common words and common concepts, like what are they all saying and what are a lot of them saying, stress in the ministry, stress in leadership is the result of 3 or 4 things. Okay, so the first question: what are the common stresses in leadership? First of all, personnel issues. Personnel issues. Okay, we all understand what that is. You're struggling with your pastor. You're struggling with a youth pastor. You're struggling with someone in the office. You're struggling maybe even with a board member. Personnel. Okay, in leadership, one of the stresses in any level of leadership is the give and take, the rub against people and issues that are more personnel related. There's always a tension in a work environment, whether you call it office politics or multiple agendas that people have. If you are a pastor all by yourself, nobody working for you, okay, you might not have as much stress as those who have a multiple staff. Just know that if you're in a smaller church, life does not get easier just because now you can hire people. Some of the workload gets easier, but now you've got the complexity of personalities and ideas and concepts. And so personnel issues is a very real thing. Okay, so office politics, unhealthy attitudes, unproductive work practices. Sometimes you got to correct people who aren't working as hard as they need to be working, and on and on and on, multiple agendas. Second issue is personal issues. Personal issues. One of the people that I interviewed talked a lot about guilt as a cause of leadership stress in their life, guilt issues. He said this, that some of us are more driven than others, but if you're performance-focused in your thinking, your value will be dictated by what you do. And if you're not careful, you can induce a lot of stress into your life because you're never able to feel satisfied with what you do and be able to say, it's good enough. How many of you at the end of a week, you finished your sermon, but you know it's not finished? Like you've finished it, you've written it, it's 4 pages or 5 pages, but you don't feel settled in it. And the temptation is to just keep working on it and keep refining it. I preached 9 years here and 12 years in La Crosse, Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. And even to this day, when I travel somewhere to preach, I still don't feel like my sermon is ready. And there's this sense of, did I pray enough? Did I study enough? Did I put enough into it? And so guilt issues drive this sense of stress. Number 2, there's leadership gifts. Leadership gift issues. Do we have a true sense of what our gifts are? Or are we trying to lead like other people are leading? And we have to be very careful about the comparison issue. And we all fall into it. Even in this role I compare myself to other college presidents whose schools enrollment is booming. And I say to myself, man, I need to be like him. I need to be like her. And I sometimes stray from the reality that I only bring to the table what God's given me in my leadership gifts, and as a result, I deal with some of that unnecessary stress. Thirdly is a false definition of success. False definition of success. What is success to you? What is it? How do you define success? Is it the numbers in attendance? Is it the numbers in the offering? Is it, what is it? Sometimes I found myself so appreciative of people after church who Sunday after Sunday after Sunday would say to me, Pastor Doug, that was a great sermon. Man, I love that. And after a while, I start living on that. And then a Sunday happens where I see them in the foyer, I walk by them, and they don't give me that same kudo. I guess they didn't say what they normally say. And that just shows to me that I was living off of the praise. Part of my success was what people would say after something that I led. And that's a false sense of success, and we have to be careful about that. Number 4, energy issues. Leadership is often stressful because it demands a lot of energy, physically, emotionally, relationally, spiritually, lots of energy. Dr. Gordon Anderson had this phrase, that leaders are not paid by the hour, they're paid by the pound. Meaning you're paid for how much weight you have to bear under. And the more weight that is on you, the more energy it takes to keep standing. And so you have to get creative in how you replenish that energy. And it might not be a 50-hour week, because in those 40 hours or 30 hours you're working, it's intense. I have given myself, without anybody even knowing it, and I should probably have you shut the machine off to not record this. No. But no, I'm just kidding. I will often find a time during the week, during the working hours, to go to the YMCA and swim. Because I need that. And it's not, I feel guilty, hope I don't have a heart attack in the pool and they find out I was swimming during working hours. I could take you into Pastor Josh's office, that it used to be my office, where I had a couch and I took naps once in a while. Because leaders are paid by the pound, not necessarily paid by the hour. So energy issues. One of the people I interviewed said there were some days I felt like I was suffocating. I was suffocating because the load was so heavy. Fifthly is change issues. Leadership is stressful because of the nature of change. Change in our culture is picking up faster and faster and faster, and it's a stress. Change represents a disruption to an organization's equilibrium. And Peter Stenke is a great writer on this, and he says, it's the leader who can most affect calm in a group who will handle stress most effectively. When change is disturbing your organization and everybody's hair is on fire, are you a non-anxious presence in that room of anxious people? And in order to do that, you have to manage your stress. And a lot of people will say, Doug, that's what I appreciated about your leadership. I appreciated, even membership meetings that sometimes they get intense and things happening, and that's where my Norwegian strength would kick in, because I just would never show that I was stressed about it. But I was internally, I was stressed about it. Just don't let them see you sweat. That's a good leadership skill, but nonetheless, you have to have that outlet in being able to work out that stress. But change is creating a lot of stress in our culture today. And here's a little hint. Don't try to, as it relates to change in the local church creates a stress, creates a little disruption. Don't try to make unhappy people happy with change. If you have people that are just generally negative, pessimistic, always looking at the glass is always half empty than half full, don't strategize wasting precious energy to try to convince them to be happy with the change. Because people who are by nature more pessimistic or negative are going to eventually revert back to that negativity. So in change management in a local church, you are not trying to convince everybody and make everybody happy. The unhappy people will be happy for maybe a day, but then they'll revert back to their normal disposition. You want to be identifying with the people that can tie into a new vision and move forward. The idea that making everybody, champion a new thing is often a fool's dream. So you don't want to run roughshod over people, certainly, but if you're waiting to get 100% consensus, you might get it in a vote, but even the next day, the ones that are typically negative people are going to be reverting back to the negativity, even though they voted for something. So just be careful on your expectations in managing change through the local church. All right, so those are some personal issues. Now, I asked the question then, beyond just general leadership stress to these ministry leaders, I asked the question, is pastoral leadership especially stressful? Like, is there something about the nature of leading in ministry that makes it more stressful than leading as a banker or a business person? And they all in unison said, yes, pastoral leadership is uniquely stressful. Number one, unrealistic expectations. 72 times in my interviews, I heard the word expectations from these dozen leaders as it relates to what's difficult about pastoral leadership. Relationships was the second number of that was identified. Stress come from high expectations and then these relational conflicts. The highly relational nature of the local church is a double-edged sword. Pastors often feel greatly loved by their people. However, love is often attached to expectations that are impossible for any pastor to fulfill. Like, you feel their love, and they love you, and they pat you on the back, but you know that pat on that back, that Pentecostal handshake might come with some expectations. And you want to be careful about those favors that come your way at the expense of carrying somebody's personal agenda through. That is a recipe for disaster. Secondly, relational conflict. Relational conflict in the local church is often much different than any other organizational situation. Because in the local church, we're Christians, we love each other, and we don't have conflict. It's like my mom and dad's marriage. They never yelled at each other. They never fought. It was just like everything's pushed under the rug. And there are some local churches that are unhealthy in that manner. There's not a lot of conflict, but there's not a lot of movement forward that requires change and that requires taking risks. And so relational conflict in the church is often something difficult. People, we just want to love each other. Well, yes, we want to love each other, but we also want to be able to love each other while we work through different opinions and different ideas. And that's stressful, and that's not always easy. And I hope that, you as pastors, you have a board of deacons in which they're not just rubber stamping everything that you are proposing, but they're pushing back on you on some things. Not because they're against you, but I learned early on, I don't have the best answers. I've got some good answers, but every good answer, every good solution I brought to a board meeting was always improved by somebody's other idea or additional idea that initially made me kind of offensive, like they're coming against me. And then as I took a deep breath and I swallowed my pride and I began to think it through, I realized, yeah, that idea improves my idea. So that is that's a leadership concept that especially younger ministers might have a hard time dealing with, especially if they come out of a family where they were always told they were right. That's one of the problems with Gen Z. The generation is now that are coming into college, and a lot of them have been told that they are perfect at everything. And whenever we as professors or whatever give them a negative mark, it's like they can't handle it. Like the roof is falling in and indicates that they have always been the perfect child, given everything that they wanted, told that they were always the winner and the champion. And you want to champion your kids, of course, but you want to be able to be resilient enough to take a pushback and be able to handle the stress that comes into that. The third area is something that we call, help me out, where am I at in your notes? Okay, role versus identity. Thank you very much. Role versus identity. Significant source of pastoral issues and stress comes when we blur our pastoral role and our personal identity together. Let me say it this way. A lot of stress comes into play when our personal identity has been hijacked by our pastoral role. Like my identity is now defined as being a pastor. Not a husband, not a dad, not just a pure, simple child of God, but my identity is wrapped up totally into the fact that I'm a pastor. No, as a pastor, that's your role, that's your calling. It's not your identity. Your identity is a child of God, a husband or a wife, a dad or a grandpa. Those are your primary identities. And the reason you don't want to stray from your primary identities is because you're going to get a lot of critiquing in your pastoral role, and you should. You should get lots of critique in your pastoral role because you don't have all the answers. And you need the wisdom of others. But if your identity is in your pastoral role, when the critique comes, you take it personally. Like, that hurt. Well, it shouldn't hurt that bad. It shouldn't wound you to the place of feeling like you're a loser. But again, if we've not been raised in an environment where dad put his thumb on us when we were out of line, or mom, you knew when you stepped across the line with mom and she'd set you in your place. If you don't have that kind of upbringing, it makes it difficult to receive it when you get it from, I don't want to give any examples, but I had a lot of people put me in my place through ministry where I made mistakes, where I missed stuff. I was pastoring this church. I was in the foyer, and I saw a young couple in the foyer, and they were sitting down, and she was obviously with child. And I was not reading my emotional intelligence was not on that day. And I said to her, and how's your baby? And I know what you're all thinking, that she wasn't, no. She said, we lost the baby yesterday. I thought you knew. Well, I was supposed to know, and maybe someone did tell me, but I totally stepped in it. And, note to self, be attentive to people. And when you make mistakes, you apologize. You make it right. You own it. So don't let your identity be defined by your role. Now, let's talk about how a pastor's healthy family of origin contributes to their ability to successfully manage the stress in ministry. First of all, blind spots. Blind spots. Common theme among the people that I interviewed was an admittance that they each experienced some level of dysfunction in their family of origin, and through either difficult experiences or a counselor, they became aware of their blind spots, their emotional blind spots. So maybe just pause here and you just think about your family of origin, okay? Think about your parents, as beautiful and lovely and as wonderful they are, they weren't perfect. And so they didn't give you a perfect upbringing. Or your family, your siblings, maybe think about how you were raised and where there might be some gaps in how you function as a leader. So I self-confess, I grew up in a non-emotional home. And so as a result of that, I'm very conflict avoidant. I learned from my mother how to not trip my dad's trigger. She learned how to not aggravate him, push him over the edge. And that's how I function as a leader in my default dysfunction. I do not push people's buttons. If I can avoid a conflict, I'm going to try to avoid a conflict. And when I need to confront a conflict, it's going to be really stressful for me. And I've had to do that. But I just know that's, some of you aren't, as averse to conflict and you handle it just fine because, you were trained to handle conflict and you saw your parents handle it well. So what are the blind spots that you carry into your pastoral role as it relates to the navigating, the negotiating that took place or didn't take place between your mom and dad and between your siblings? So blind spots. Number 2, insecurity. Several of my participants referred to the influential nature of negative family of origin that contributed to incredible insecurity. One individual said this, that as a result of this, what happens is we often assign every negative issue in ministry to the wrong column. What he means by that is that what happens is we assign this negative experience with a board member or a person in the church or a staff member, and we assign it in the column of it's their fault. They're the jerk. They were wrong. And we struggle to put it in the column of what part of this do I have to own? What part of this do I have to say, I contributed to this? Or at least look in the mirror and say, okay, this was unfair, this was not right. I don't think I made a big mistake here, but I'm having to deal with somebody who's puking all over me. And I got to look in the mirror and say, God, what do you want to teach me in this? As opposed to going to the next board meeting and reading someone the riot act or matching volume to volume. We've got to be able to get over our insecurity. I can tell you this, that one of the people I interviewed was Dr. Wood, our general superintendent at the time. And, Dr. Wood was like this incredibly calm, poised leader, lawyer-like, just incredible. Like nothing rattles him. Well, as he told me his story, when he was a college student at Evangel, he'd come off the mission field, he goes to Evangel, and he gets hired to be the campus pastor there at Evangel University, and he spun into a depression super, super quick into his first ministry assignment. And this would have been back in the, 60s, I mean, way back before counseling became legitimate way of remedying our hurts and our pains. But his counselor helped him unpack, hey, you came from a home where your dad, as a missionary, loved Jesus, and certainly loved you, but he was never there for you. And Dr. Wood basically said, my dad never hugged me, and my dad never told me he loved me. So he grew up in a Pentecostal home where the passion for Jesus is strong, but the familial passion and expression of intimacy certainly wasn't. And so he had to work around that and had to deal with that and had to, work through the insecurity issues that came from that family of origin issue. Number 3, family issues. Family issues. There's one of the reasons pastoral ministry is uniquely stressful is that compared to banking leadership, business leadership, medical leadership, this kind of leadership affects your children and your spouse more than any other. Because we bring our family into this. Our family is engaged in it with us. And so they feel the stress as opposed to if I was a banker or a doctor or a baker or a candlestick maker. We bring this stuff home with us, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and our family feels it. And we've got to figure out ways to not allow our kids as PKs to fall away because they heard too much negativity about the church. Number 4 is getting help. All pastoral leaders have to know how to get the help they need. And counseling is so critically important. A mentor, someone in whom you can talk with, and be able to express how deeply hurt you are because of what someone did. You got to find someone in whom you can unpack that with, and you really need to find someone outside of the church to be able to share that with. I find myself being that person for a lot of students that I've had in class that are now in ministry and going through stuff, and they reach out to me, and I'm the sounding board for them. But we need that. We got to be able to know where to get the help that is available for us. All right, turn your notes over, and I've got to wrap up here in just a few minutes. Negative effects of stress for leaders. What are the negative effects? Number 1, loss of joy. Loss of joy. Stress is the great joy killer of the day. Anxiety just steals the joy from inside of our hearts for what we're doing. And Job says this in Job 9:25, "My days are swifter than a runner. They fly away without a glimpse of joy." And of course, he went through, the catastrophic losses in his life. But we lose our joy. Secondly, we lose productivity. When we're under stress, our adrenaline goes way up, and we initially get a lot of things done. And then it's Monday morning, and it's like, I don't even feel like I'm a Christian. Do you ever feel that way, the Monday blues? And for youth pastors, you feel it on Thursday? Like I would leave church every Sunday feeling, man, this was a great Sunday. It was awesome, man. It was great. People filled the altars. And then I wake up Monday morning, and I don't feel that. I feel yucky. Well, it's the physical response to the adrenaline rush. That's what it is. It's just the physical response, the way God made our bodies, to recover. The adrenal glands were drained because of the preaching and all the people. And now the body is saying, I need to restore those adrenal glands, and the only way I can get it is to make you depressed, slow you down. And that's what my counselor taught me. Depression is your friend. It's telling you need recovery. Something's wrong, and you need recovery. Now, something's not wrong in terms of, you're crazy, you're going crazy, but your body's been taxed, and your body needs recovery. So, we lose a sense of productivity. And again, if you are defining success by how much you're getting done, quantitatively in your ministry, that's a poor view of success. And that loss of productivity where you're actually getting better and you're getting stronger through your day off, your Sabbath, or a mini sabbatical or a long weekend. You got to deal with this sense of lost productivity. You might not be getting as much done, but you're getting healthier. So that's number 3, or number 2. Number 3 is loss of spiritual reality. What happens is we just kind of lose that sense of being able to be still and know that I'm God. And the reason we're losing that is because when I'm still, I'm anxious. I got to go. Could you take a whole day Could you do 24 hours of no activity and no music? Like if you're going to worship, it's a cappella worship. You can have a Bible, but you can't have any other extraneous Christian reading. It's like a whole day of nothingness. And if you're a workaholic, that scares you to death. Because 15 minutes into it, you're climbing the walls. One of the assignments I do with students is in my spiritual formation classes, they do a two-hour meditation solitude retreat. 2 hours. And they write a report on it. 90% of them tell them it was the hardest thing they ever did. Why? Because they're a generation that is 24/7 in front of their screens, 24/7 active. You know, they're scared of the silence. And it's just a sign of unhealth. So let me give you ways to get the proper rhythm in life, and it's the acrostic SLOW. SLOW. S stands for stop the constant push for more. Stop the constant push for more. Jesus said a man's life does not consist by the abundance of his possessions, and I would say ministry is not based on the abundance of activity, good, godly ministry activity. A full calendar, a busy calendar, is not a sign of healthy spirituality. If your calendar is full and you're bragging to yourself about how many days off you've given up to do ministry, you're burning the candle at both ends and you're not as smart as you think you are. You got to have margin, so you got to slow down. L, learn to say no. Learn to say no. You've got to be able to say no. I train ministry students that you got to be ready to have your day off interrupted. You're not going to be that pastor who says, oh, someone's calling, this is my day off, why are you calling me? And I say, like tell people you came from the Baptist college, if that's what you're going to tell them, but you don't come from North Central or Trinity and say something like that. People don't schedule their heart attacks around your days off or your vacations, so you're going to get interrupted. But there are some things that you have to have in your calendar, like a date with your spouse, dates with your kids, and then when someone calls to ask if they can come over and it's not a crisis, you got to be able to say, sorry, I've already got something on my calendar. You got to be able to say no. You can't do everything. You can't get it all in. Thirdly, obey. O is obey the fourth commandment, which is the Sabbath. It's a whole lot that we can talk about, but you need to be taking your day off. Okay? And your day off might not even be your Sabbath. Your day off might be the day you mow the lawn, you run the groceries, you do the domestic kinds of things like on a Friday, and Saturday has to be a Sabbath. More towards the traditional end of it, that it's a worshipful day, it's a family day, it's a do-nothing day. Okay? Your day off is not always equal to your Sabbath, especially if your day off is now I'm doing all the family chores that have to be done. And I pity all of you that are co-vocational, where you're working full-time and you're pastoring. I haven't cracked that code, and how do you do Sabbath when you've got when that's the call that you have. But that's something that you have to be really mindful of. And then fourthly, W is wait for God's timing. Wait for God's timing. I close with this. It's a plaque on the wall of St. Benedict's Monastery in Colorado. God is speaking. He says, my name is I Am. When you live in the past with its mistakes and regrets, it's hard because I'm not there. My name is not I was. When you live in the future with all its problems and fears, it's hard because I'm not there. My name is not I will be. But when you live in the moment, it's not hard because my name is I Am, and I'm there. So Lord, I pray, bless these pastors and these leaders as they manage the stress of ministry. It's an honor to be given the assignment to do hard work. Show us how to do it and stay healthy. I pray in your name. Amen. Thanks, everybody.